The school fire and the loss of student Beverly Jones was a very sad day for Branson. But it also could have been much worse if it hadn't been for heroes like Glendale Bogus, Mr. Cody, Mr. Chase, and some of the students that helped get the school evacuated quickly.
We lived about 200 yards from that building that burned, and so it was a very traumatic event for the entire town, but I think it hit my dad especially hard.
I think it was the second year I was there, we had a fire drill, which we always do. We usually do 2 of them a year. And so the first one came and he was in his office at that building there. And some of the kids were horsing around on the way out. We were lined up, we were heading out, but they were not being serious about it and they were joking about it. And so when the drill was over and we all went back in, he got on the intercom and he spoke to us about the fire, about the person who died, and about how important it is. And he said, we're going to do the drill again and we're going to do it right. And in 30 seconds later, the bells went off again and we all did the fire drill a second time.
I would classify John Earl as leading more by example than by verbal instructions or whatever. He was an easy man to like and an easy man to respect due to his actions.
Everyone says he was a man of few words, and I think that's why when he spoke, people listened.
Very quiet, always a gentleman, thoughtful about people.
You know, he was really an icon for the community, well respected, as honest as the day is long.
He could have been voted mayor if he had elected around.
Well, he was a terrific coach in the area. He was also a terrific father.
He had character and he had a good personality also. And he got along well with people. And it didn't seemingly make any difference what your church affiliation was, or what your politics was, or what your economic status was. Chase knew how to talk to you.
A gentleman. I can't say anything more because he was always a gentleman. In fact, a lot of the teachers and I have talked about that. He was a true gentleman, and you don't see that a lot today.
You respected him, you know, and of course respect's earned, and he earned that for sure.
He was very special in as much as he did things for us that made us feel special, when in reality, you know, he was special. So I always said I had a special but not a unique relationship with him, because every boy and girl who had him as a coach, teacher, mentor could tell you the same stories.
He knew more about humans than anybody I've ever met in my whole life. That's quite a statement.
He had a certain aura about him, like a dignity and integrity. It was like talking to a priest almost.
Well, he was a very ethical, dedicated man. Some of the things I remember about him is he was in the Kiwanis Club of Branson, and he was secretary-treasurer for, I believe, 40 straight years for this Kiwanis Club. And every Wednesday night, my brother Bill and I would be talked into helping fold and stamp the newsletter each week for the Kiwanis Club. I believe Dad also taught Sunday school for 30 or 40 consecutive years.
I went to church with John Earl. He's the one who convinced me I could be a Sunday school teacher. I later served as an elder in the church for him. He was at Bev and I's wedding when our kids were born, you know. Then later, when my kids were in high school, by then John Earl was the superintendent. And he shepherded them just as much as he did me.
Well, he was always somebody that we looked up to, of course, like any son looks to his father, but he was just a pillar of strength, and yet was still warm to all of us, and you always felt comfortable being around him, and there was no question about whether or not you would question his judgment. Whatever he said, that's just kind of what you do. So he was just an excellent father figure for all of us.
There were some issues with close friends of ours and in some of his players that they probably didn't know who else to turn to. But he would drop whatever he was doing and help, and I'm sure there are many things he did that none of us ever even knew about.
If you got in trouble, he'd get you out. You'd take a lecture for it, but he'd do that for you.
You know, a bunch of us got in trouble at Halloween. He went to bat for us, and we went down to a building over the bank. I don't remember what it was for. It wasn't a courtroom. Maybe it was a city courtroom. I don't know. A lawyer for the guys that signed Victoria wanted us all to go to jail, and John Earl pretty well told him, he said, that ain't gonna happen.
Ask that person what time it is and he'll tell you how to build a watch.
He would say, tie the horse outside or something, you know, if you were horsing around. And
Dang nation, you know, when something would go wrong, he'd say, dang nation. I don't know where that came from, but I always thought it was an interesting comeback.
If you put his brains in a cockroach, it'd run backwards.
Jiminy criminy, he would say that a lot too.
Your grandmother, Anita Chase, and what a sweet, wonderful woman she was. She would come to all the little formal events, and she would make punch for the teachers and bake cookies and come in and set things up, and was such a gracious woman.
Well, I think you would say they were just dedicated to each other. No matter what, you know, if a problem came up, they would face it together, and there was never any question about their loyalty to each other or faithfulness. I never remember seeing them argue about anything.
We were down there Easter Sunday, and I remember he had a stress test that Friday, and I can remember there. We all know about the signs of heart attack now. I remember him sitting on the couch. His shoulder was left arm and shoulder was real sore on Easter Sunday, and so we ended up leaving to drive back to St. Louis on Sunday, and I believe we stopped at Scott's house, and that's the way we found out about it.
I got a call from my twin brother Scott, who had been called by the neighbor, Stanley Ball, that you know, your dad has just had a serious heart attack, and all I can tell you is it's bad. A neighbor called and said, your dad's had a heart attack and the paramedics were working on him, but it doesn't look good. And according to my mom, I think she had heard the lawnmower idling instead of moving was the first indication, and she's the one who went out and found him, and she tried to administer CPR and you know, mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, but he was gone. Of course, she tried to call for help, but from what we understand, he had the instant death heart attack and probably was dead before he hit the ground.
I couldn't believe it. I absolutely could not believe that he was gone. He was too good a man to be gone.
I can't tell you the number of times that people have come up to me and would say that, I just want you to know I think your dad was one of the finest men I've ever met.
After the funeral, and we went out to the cemetery for the graveside service, and players and people were just coming up and shaking our hands and expressing condolences. And one of his players, who to this day I don't remember who it was, and he didn't give me his name, and he just came up and looked me in the eye and shook my hand and said, "As far as I'm concerned, your dad was the greatest man to ever walk the face of the earth." Another one, also at the cemetery, said, "I really think if it weren't for your dad, I would be dead right now." So you're talking about former players that at this time would have been in their early 50s maybe. But those were profound statements, I thought, and I've never forgotten them.
I would say to him that he was one of the most important people in my life as I went through high school and grew up.
He was a special person.
You know, he should have been here still yet with me. Yeah, you just can't understand how great he was.
He lived an exemplary life. He was just a wonderful man.
That's what I think of when I think of my dad is, he was just a great example as a man, as an educator, as a coach, as a leader, community involvement, whatever he did, you know, he was predictable. You knew you could count on him to do the right thing at the right time.
But Mr. Chase was my mentor, and I've always been thankful for that, because you'd have to look pretty hard to find a better one. But he was my mentor in public education, you know, and just in life in general. He was a great role model for anybody and everybody.
Thank you, Coach. Thank you. We love you. And we know we'll miss you.
I'd like to tell him, I never had a chance to say, you know, how we miss him.
I would say, Dad, thanks for setting such a great example, you know, for what a man should be, and his loyalty to his family, and doing his best to raise his kids right.
The greatest gift you could ever give to us was your name, and the trust and honor and everything that goes with that. That's the best legacy that you could ever have given us.
I'd want him to know how he changed my life, that he, because of the way he treated me. And I said earlier I had a special relationship, but I didn't do anything to have been treated special. John Earl was a special one. He did it because he could.
I know it sounds selfish, but Lord, tell us why. Why take one we love so to your home up on high? He lived his life fully, and ne'er did he swear. He handled each new challenge with tenderness and care. His friends there were many, and all filled with grief, but to know that he's in your home was our only relief. As a scholar and citizen, Coach Chase ranked with the best. As a husband and father, he was ahead of the rest. But why take him now, Lord? I know if we shouldn't ask. If you have new jobs for his talents, he'll handle each task. On this earth he had records few men can approach. And if you have basketball in heaven, you sure have a good coach.
I probably wouldn't have been a coach if it hadn't been for John Earl.
I felt like I was his son.
You know, he was his second dad for us.
Oh, he was my second father.
And he was almost like your surrogate dad.
I felt like I was his family.
He was such an important person to me. Just a great guy, a great guy.
I thought I'd get to have him for my friend for a lot longer than I did.
We were really lucky to have him.
Yeah.
Okay.